So my name is Noah, and along with Micah, Justin, and Sam, I'm part of the DROVER research project. Now, DROVER is an amalgamation of the words drone and rover. Essentially, our mission is to get a drone, a flying vehicle, and a rover, a ground vehicle, to communicate in order to pathfind in unknown environments. We chose this combination of a drone and a rover because we believe they each offer a unique and important perspective to pathfinding. The drone gives us this 2D sort of map, this overview, this long-term global view. Meanwhile, the rover is on the ground, so it has a much more local and detailed view. And we believe that this kind of system, a drone rover system, has a lot of uses, especially in fields like environmental engineering, whether you want to plant trees or crops. It's also good in rescue missions, where going to places where humans might not be able to survive, or trash collection, or space exploration. Things that humans just don't want to do, but robots might be able to do it better. So that's a use of the drover system. So in researching this problem of robots pathfinding, you get very quickly to a modern robotics problem known as SLAM, or simultaneous localization and mapping, which has a pretty self-explanatory name. Essentially, it's a dual problem. You have to figure out where you are, while at the same time figuring out what your surroundings look like. So you're localizing and you're mapping. And we argue that a drone rover combination is a uniquely good combination for this problem. For the reasons we gave above, they both give good perspectives that can really feed into each other well. In trying to achieve this grand goal, the work of our project is sort of split into two sections. The first is physical engineering considerations. And you can see here, this is the drone that we're working with. It was inherited from an old project focused on just drone flying. So we inherited this and we sort of rebuilt it, got a new frame, nicer wire management and Velcros, in order to soon attach a Raspberry Pi and camera. And you can see this is the old version. It's not nearly as nice and spiffy as this new one. We also have done some 3D printing, including trying to make a battery case. And we recently bought a new small rover for testing. And we're looking to start putting the Raspberry Pi together on it, get the motor controllers working, add the cameras. So hopefully we can sort of interweave that with our coding, which Justin will now talk about.
So, as Noah was saying in the beginning, we want to solve the problem of pathfinding. So, this is, I guess, a preliminary kind of pathfinding script. So, basically, what we input in is a bird's eye view of obstacles. The image here is a little bit simplified, obviously. So, and we can input a start and end point. Ideally, it will just navigate from the start and end point for the obstacles. And the algorithm we use to calculate this path is called Dijkstra algorithm. And yeah, we'll go into it more in the next couple of slides about pathfinding. So here is one of our first tests with Dijkstra. So we give the start point as the left topmost corner and the bottom right corner as the endpoint, and Dijkstra generates this path. As you can see, it's a little bit. Oh, well, first of all, to find the outlines of these obstacles, we have to contour the image and then find these thresholds to kind of create the white outlines you see on the second image in the middle, and that way Dijkstra knows what the obstacles are and what to avoid. And then the path that's generated, it's a little bit wobbly and there's a straight thing in the line. It's not really realistic. So in the next slide, we dilate, which means basically these obstacles, these shapes are becoming their walls are becoming a little bit thicker, pretty much. So there's more, I guess, it thinks that they're bigger than a little bit bigger than they actually are. So then it'll leave a little bit of room in the corners, and so you can see in the first image, that's one dilation. It hugs all these walls, and then it just gets really close. But then in the second one, where we dilate it 5 times, it avoids the corners a lot more, like an actual car or rover might in the real world. So that's why we dilate it. Yeah,
and this was one of the first solutions that we sought out. And obviously, these aren't real maps; these are just maps that I drew on the back of a worksheet. which is kind of cool. But looking at real maps, we were like, this idea is probably not going to work anyway because you're just working with so many different colors and contours. And usually we're going to be trying to find like something like a road. So keeping track of that with only like this kind of binary absolute mapping wasn't really the best way for us. So the alternative was making a maze that would be more weighted. So instead of just detecting contours and saying that's off bounds, what we would instead do is look at the color that the pixel is on and say, okay, if we're changing color, we're going to assign a cost to that, and that's going to be more costly. So essentially, it still models this idea of like if you go over a barrier, if you go over a changed color, that's not going to be as good. But the difference is you're still allowed to go over that barrier. And as you can see in the images that we kind of drew on paper, this doesn't work as well because the boundaries are so thin that it's just more costly. It would be more costly to go around it than to just go to plow straight through it. But in real images, what we found is that this actually works much better, and it actually is more realistic. So we found a bird's eye view of Pingry online, and we applied our algorithm to it. And what we found that was on the left-hand side, obviously you could see it didn't work. It sort of followed that same sort of idea of, oh, I'm going to cross this boundary because taking a longer path wouldn't work as well. But on the right-hand side, you can see that it actually did work as planned. It stayed on the road, and it followed the road, and actually what is a pretty realistic path for a rover or a car or something of that sort. Here's just another example. We accidentally put it in the forest, and it maneuvered its way through the forest pretty nicely, and I'm kind of proud of it. So, yeah. In terms of modeling some of the things that a rover will have to do, we've looked into stereo vision, which is a form of 3D vision for the rover. Basically, the way it works is you have two cameras, two visual cameras, and using mathematics, it's able to look at the disparity, so the difference between pixels. Like these images are going to be very similar, but they're going to be a little shifted, and that shift will actually tell you how far away something is in the image, which is really powerful. So stereo vision done right looks like this, and you can see how it catches the lamp is closer to the object. They're using like a color map, and then the head is a little further away, and then the background's like more gray, and that's like a darker gray. So we tried this initially, but what we didn't realize was that we actually had to calibrate the cameras first, so you'll see that the images are not quite as good as we would have hoped. So using my iPhone camera, I took pairs of images, and you can see that these images, well, they look like Jackson Pollock paintings, but they don't particularly look like useful stereo vision. And that's because, obviously, as I said, we didn't calibrate the images and the cameras itself. So why do you need to calibrate? Well, most cameras, including iPhones and the cameras we bought for our rover, they have built-in distortion. So as you can see in the image on the right, like the walls and the background, like they're obviously curved when they're supposed to be straight. So essentially, what we have to do is we have to use code from online, input pictures of us holding checkerboards. I know that sounds weird, but that's actually what they need, because then they could quantify the distortion in the image, and then essentially they give you this matrix, this list of numbers that allow you to, you can then apply it to your camera moving forward, and it'll be straightened out. So hopefully, once we have our images straightened out, we can move on to do some good stereo vision.
As we mentioned, we did rebuild the drone. However, we have not successfully got to fly yet. So that's one of our biggest priorities is trying to get it in the air. We do have all the parts, and they're all put on. I think we're just working with a mission planner right now, which is the software or the ground control software that we use. So we're just working with that and trying to calibrate it correctly. So yeah, that's one of our biggest priorities. And then rover. Right now, I actually brought the rover home from school, and I'm working on putting it together. So yeah, just putting it together and putting the pie, and then getting it to move. Yeah, and so yeah, as you mentioned, that the rover and drone communication will be really important. So we want to combine the two vision aspects, the one that I talked about with pathfinding from the overhead view, and then Noah talked about stereo vision. So we want to have those kind of, I guess, interact with each other and supplement each other. So we're working on kind of creating like maybe like a single map using these two aspects of vision. And yeah.
Thank you for listening.